There's one name that sends shivers down the spines of crypto fanatics across the world: Do Kwon. If you've ever invested in Terra Luna, this mere mention of this man's name will make you grit your teeth in rage. But who is he? And why has he become so infamous? Stick around, because in this video, we'll be uncovering the mystery behind one of the biggest collapses in crypto history. Was Do Kwon an overambitious entrepreneur with a good heart, or a deceitful fraudster who stole billions from hardworking people? Watch until the end to find out the truth.
UST!
Kwon Do-hyung, commonly known as Do Kwon, was born in 1991 in Seoul, the capital of South Korea. Kwon wasn't like most kids. While most of us grew up dreaming of becoming famous artists, brave firefighters, or adventurous astronauts, he had other plans. Kids his age were taught to reach for the stars, but Kwon had turned his gaze to a place closer to home: Silicon Valley. Apart from being a StarCraft fan, Kwon was also an avid reader when he was young and greatly admired the giants of Silicon Valley. The pioneers of the information age and the personal computer revolution were major inspirations for him. Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and Daniel Ek were just a few of the names which stirred the passion for innovation brewing in his heart. Kwon admired these figures for changing the world, all while cementing themselves in the annals of history. The idea of recognition and glory excited him. It should come as no surprise then to learn that Kwon was an ambitious kid. He moved around a lot, dragged around the world for his father's work as a pharmaceutical distributor. Kwon had lived in a number of different places, so he had plenty of experience in the real world. Not only that, he was driven to always perform his best at school, constantly pushing himself to excel. This ambition wasn't just a unique quirk of Kwon's personality. It was necessary for him to succeed in life. He attended the incredibly prestigious Daewon Foreign Language High School, which is one of South Korea's top 2 schools whose graduates were most likely to be accepted when applying to the leading universities in the United States. Kwon's hard work paid off. In 2015, he finished a bachelor's degree in computer science at Stanford University. Both in the Korean and American academic worlds, Kwon was among the elite. After his graduation, Kwon did what a lot of computer science students fresh out of Stanford do. He went to work for Microsoft. In 2012, during his studies, he'd already completed an internship at Apple, so Kwon was no stranger to the professional world. He worked for Microsoft as a software engineer for a few months, but quickly realized it wasn't for him. Anyone who'd met Kwon could tell you that he wasn't the kind of person to be happy with the bare minimum. He had no plans of enjoying a humble job at a desk for a big company, clocking in at 9 and out at 5. Most of all, Kwon hated being told what to do. There was no place in the world for him but at the top. He craved recognition and control, and he knew that small-time internships at Microsoft and Apple weren't going to cut it. He pulled out of Silicon Valley and returned to Seoul. Kwon's mind was afire with ideas and plans. His first startup project was called AnyFi, which focused on providing bandwidth to those who didn't have access to the internet. It didn't exactly take off, as investors had serious doubts and pulled out. Kwon had foreseen this. He was ambitious, but not deluded. He knew his first attempt at achieving greatness probably wouldn't work. Kwon's first project wasn't a complete failure either. In fact, his time spent growing AnyFi had opened his eyes to something that would change his and thousands of people across the world's lives forever. He'd found the seed of the tree that would grow into something larger than any one man could ever dream of. If you think one setback was enough to deter Kwon, you haven't been paying attention. He tried his luck again, this time partnering with a friend he made at Stanford called Nicholas Platius. During his time developing NeFi, Kwon had noticed a potential of cryptocurrencies and was convinced decentralized banking was the future.
I believe too strongly in Bitcoin. I honestly didn't think it would fall this much.
There was one form of crypto that caught Kwon's eye more than any other: stablecoins.
You're going to be held hostage to whoever happens to have control over the underlying centralized money. And that's why I think decentralized stablecoins are the most important innovation in crypto.
The idea of these currencies was that one token would always equal $1, known as a peg. By typing the value of the currency to a real-world currency, the value of the cryptocurrency would remain steady, rather than fluctuate wildly like so many projects in the past. There was just one problem with stablecoins. None of them worked. Though a number of projects like DAI started off well in the past, they all eventually crashed and burned. Even Facebook, despite their incredible resources, failed to keep their stablecoin Diem afloat. Where most people saw an idea to stay clear of, Kwon saw a chance at greatness. The immense risks be damned. Under the false name Rick Sanchez, Kwon revived the failed Basis stablecoin project in 2017. Unsurprisingly, things didn't go to plan. Kwon had covered his tracks with his pseudonym though, so his integrity would remain intact should he attempt something similar again. In 2018, Kwon and Daniel Shin, a big-time Silicon Valley entrepreneur, partnered up and launched Terra Labs, a name which would soon stoke the flames of hatred and ire across the crypto community. But more on that later. When Terra first launched, it was seen as a reasonable, stable, and innovative cryptocurrency rather than the mad project it's known as today. Kwon claimed Terra could fix the fundamental problems that had driven so many predecessors to ruin. Here's how it worked. Terra operated with two tokens, UST pegged to the US dollar at all times, and Luna, which was meant to absorb volatility.
UST! UST! UST!
Since UST was not backed by a tie to the US dollar, Kwon and Shin developed an algorithm that would keep UST pegged to the dollar through the Luna token, and thus keep everything in equilibrium. Not only that, but the Luna token would also serve as a kind of voting chip for users in the community to voice their opinion on important decisions. The main appeal of Terra was its promise of stability, with a fixed yield rate of 20% per year, guaranteed security, and a decision-making model that took into account the opinions of its users. It's easy to see why the currency gained so much traction. Terra, ironically enough, took the crypto world by storm. Kwon knew he'd just created something that would make him famous, unbeknownst to him, for all the wrong reasons. The astronomical success of Terra went to Kwon's head. After all, he looked on his way to reinventing how the world approached finance. Who wouldn't get a big ego? But Kwon took it too far. Employees within the company claimed he acted like a dictator, berating the staff at every turn. On top of this, the supposed democratic nature of the company was only a facade. Kwon made every decision himself, and always had the final say, no matter what. The problem with dictators is that they don't often take on criticism. Many experts in the field began pointing out flaws in the Terra model. Chief among these criticisms was that should the UST no longer match the US dollar, Luna would have to save it. In that case, however, investors would pull out of the project, creating an inevitable death spiral. The whole project rested on a frail house of cards. Not only that, Kwon had insisted at all times that Terra always offer a 20% fixed interest rate, even if the market said otherwise. This ironclad fixed yield was hugely attractive and brought in a lot of clients. However, Terra also allowed you to withdraw your savings at any point in time, with no waiting period required.
At any given time, you can swap 1 Terra USD for $1 worth of Luna, in which case the protocol simply mints $1 worth of Luna to give back to the sender.
The combination of the two was a ticking time bomb. If anything went wrong and a panic began to spread, Terra would see massive withdrawals all at once. It would be disastrous. So Kwon listened to all of this criticism. His response: making your mum jokes about the expert critics. Seriously, he took to Twitter and relentlessly attacked any that voiced any kind of grievance with the Terra system. He mocked doubters and claimed they were too broke to take part in the project. Kwon even did an interview where he claimed it was fun to watch the other crypto firms crash and burn.
95% are gonna die.
Yeah.
95% are going to die. Yeah, there's also entertainment in watching companies die too.
Kwon's overinflated ego had led to him thinking of himself as a cult leader, infallible and godlike. His followers became known as lunatics, and they followed him unflinchingly. It didn't matter if he was a bit brash or making million-dollar bets on the success of his business. They told themselves he was still a pioneer and a genius. This was a man the world had entrusted with over $60 billion. Pensions, house plans, and life savings were all in this egomaniac's hands.
And then, I just would stop working on this.
Until one day, his fingers slipped and everyone paid the price. It's the 9th of May 2022. If you've never heard of crypto, it feels like a day like any other. The sun is shining and everyone's enjoying their morning breakfast, getting ready to head to work. If you have savings in Terra, however, your entire world has just been doused in gasoline and set on fire. The UST, the token always pegged to the US dollar, dropped in value. Rather than being worth $1, it was now worth 92 cents. This was a massive problem. As mentioned prior, the entire Terra system depended on the UST being pegged to the dollar. The whole thing would collapse if this wasn't fixed quickly. Kwon and his staff tried to alleviate concerns by leveraging a $1.5 billion emergency loan to keep the UST afloat and stabilize the system. But the underlying issues the critics had identified proved to be far more problematic than Kwon had prepared for. As soon as a UST drops, thousands upon thousands of people begin to withdraw their savings. This pushes the value of the UST down further, and Luna can't possibly keep up. The peg continues failing, and more people start withdrawing to save whatever they can. The death spiral so many tried to warn Kwon about is taking place before his very eyes. Mass withdrawals kept piling on. The UST fell to 90 cents, then 85 cents, then 69 cents. Within a matter of hours, Terra's stable token fell from 44 cents to 5 cents, and finally to $0. The whole project crashed, and billions of dollars in capital were erased in the blink of an eye. $45 billion in savings, house payments, vacations, and everything in between were instantly lost. Where Luna had once sold at $119.51 a token, it was now worth virtually nothing. The Terra project was over. When the panic finally faded and realization dawned on those who had invested in Terra, despair crept in. The Terra subreddit became filled with posts lamenting about how they'd lost their house and all their life savings. Many lost hundreds of thousands in the crash. It was a disaster of the highest order. The reason for the sudden dip in the UST peg is still hotly debated today with no clear answer, though many speculate it was a deliberate attack by an outside influence seeking to bring Terra down. The whole situation was eerily similar to the infamous Fire Festival, run by fraudster Billy McFarland. McFarland had sold the world the idea of a massive, all-inclusive luxury festival, but had, in truth, lied about nearly every claim he'd made. When the whole thing came crashing down, he simply moved on to the following scheme. This didn't seem to be the case for Kwon. He took to Twitter and voiced how devastated he felt about the collapse. He apologized for bringing so much pain in people's lives. As much as it's undeniable that Kwon let the fame and power get to his head, his heartbreak did seem genuine.
So whenever we feel like we're no longer in a position to be able to best serve the community, we pull the trigger and 24 hours we're gone. We burn all of our assets, we cut all of our ties, and it's nothing.
He genuinely seemed to want to help people save money through crypto, and had even named his daughter Luna after the project. No apology, no matter how heartfelt, could quell people's fury. The hacker group Anonymous released a video promising Kwon would be brought to justice. At one point, an investor who had lost over $2 million through Terra even broke into Kwon's condo and demanded he answer for his actions. Kwon's family was terrified, and his wife had to call the police. But that's the nature of business, right? Some projects succeed and others fail. There's no point fretting over it. Kwon was sorry for the savings lost, but the world had to move on, and soon both the names Do Kwon and Terra faded into obscurity. That was the end of the story. Or was it? You see, despite Kwon's seemingly heartfelt apology, he'd done something incredibly bizarre only a few days before the collapse of the UST and Luna. He'd actually dissolved Terra in South Korea. Not only that, reports came out that he'd been cashing out $80 million per month from Terra, rather than going all in on the cryptocurrency as he'd claimed. Though Kwon disputes the claims, estimates say he'd have made around $2.7 billion from the dissolution of the company shortly before the crash. It was all incredibly suspicious. The comparisons to McFarlane were starting to become more and more appropriate as more information revealed itself to the public. When Kwon appeared on the Up Only livestream, Martin Shkreli even joked, "Prison isn't that bad." Just like McFarlane, the police were hot on his tail. The South Korean government cancelled his passport, which effectively meant he would be unable to travel. When asked about his passport on the Unchained podcast, Kwon said that he wasn't using it anyway, then refused to elaborate further. Interpol put out a red notice for his arrest. Kwon was caught in Montenegro on the 24th of March 2023 whilst trying to flee to Dubai with forged documents.
Terraform co-founder Do Kwon has been indicted in the US following his arrest in Montenegro with a fake passport.
He is facing serious fraud charges in the United States for his actions at the helm of Terra. Only time will tell whether the truth will come out and whether Kwon will face the justice he deserves. Kwon's ambition had pushed him to soaring heights, but his ego and need for control had sent him spiraling back down to earth.
It's a cycle of life. You begin from nothing and go back to nothing. And that's exactly where I want to be.